Did you hear that?
Yes, sir, I sure did.
Hi, Daphne.
Or, well, hello, Michael. We are here doing your interview for Lure Entertainment. You ready to get started?
Yes, ma'am.
Are we doing a all holds barred or
Go
just
ahead.
ask whatever? All right. So, how did you become a director?
Now, that's a nice story, actually. I was a cinematographer and I went to film school, did all that crazy stuff back in the 70s. And I had worked for a while with a really talented director named Peter Smiley from South Africa. And I did a bunch of stuff with him where we traveled all over the world and stuff. And I had a reputation as being good, but I had a reputation as being a very old English man, which is hilarious because I'm not. I'm kind of very old now, but then I was actually in my 20s. But when at one point after I had shot some Marlboro commercials, Ridley Scott saw one of them and he had his producer call my agent and asked me to go shoot a Nissan commercial, which was a Nissan Turbo Z commercial that where we shot the commercial, shot this car doing like all these really crazy things, running from this sort of paramilitary group, and it was all in a dream. But the sheriff's union and the insurance companies didn't like it. They thought it promoted unsafe driving and they had it banned. It only showed one time on the Super Bowl. But we did that. And then Ridley and I went to south of France and shot some Chanel commercials. And then I shot a few more things with him. And then I was actually in Paris about to buy the top floor of a building on Rue de Lafayette. And I was going to move there. I had a bank account, I had a girlfriend, and I was going to move there. And Ridley actually called me while I was in the office to sign the papers. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just goofing off." And he said, "Okay, well, you need to get back to LA." So I did. I didn't buy the place, went back to LA, sat down with Ridley, and he told me that I needed to be directing. I thought that was odd, but he told me that. For me, I looked at Ridley Scott as like the Rembrandt of the 20th century. And I couldn't understand why he actually thought that I should be a director. And he told me, "You can be a director at my company, or you could go somewhere else. It doesn't matter. You should just be a director." And that was in 1989. And I was 31 years old. And I had heard things like advertising agency guys saying that they wanted me to direct something, and people, other production company producers talked to me about it. But when Ridley said it, I heard it. And I said, yeah, maybe I should do that. So I joined his company. I was a director at his company for a while. Then I went and joined GLG. And during these days, I was just doing TV commercials. And I say just doing, they were really the biggest commercials around, and it was the greatest thing. 2008 kind of destroyed that for most people, but it was really good, and that's where it happened. I actually didn't go to film school thinking about being a director. I went to film school thinking about being a DP. I did do something that was slightly different when I went to film school, is that I knew that I needed to deal with actors. And so in 1978, I started taking acting classes. And I did that not to be an actor. I did that to learn the language of the actor so that I could deal with actors. And that and working with Ridley Scott are two things that really paid off.
That's awesome. He's a great director.
He's the
Okay,
best.
so what do you think is the most important skills for a director to have?
Gosh. Now that's a really interesting question because I'll never forget the first job that I got as a director. And the first thing that I did is I called my friend Megan Foley, who is a casting director in LA. And I said, "I've got this thing. I want you to cast it. And what the heck do I do?" And I didn't know. I mean, nobody seems to teach us, what to do in casting. And now I'm not answering your question completely with that statement yet, but it's just as an example that the great thing about directing is that it is meant to be somebody's vision. And so we all need to prepare for how we do that vision, but most people do it differently. And that's what Megan told me about that casting. She says, well, some people come in and do this or this or this or this. And I was like, wow, it's like, you know, it's like the Wild West. So what do you do? And now, I mean, it's like as far as casting, I'm like the worst because I go to casting session, I turn it into an acting class. I'll have the casting director looking at their watch. Oh my God, they're stacking up outside, like planes coming into LaGuardia. And, they're saying that because they know that, it's SAG and they're going to start going into getting paid. And people are not going to like that. But I remember one time I was doing something and I was casting for this show and the producer was like, Michael, it's like you're taking too much time. And I said, okay, how much time did you book for actors with me? And they said 3 minutes. I said 3 minutes, 3 minutes. In the 3 minutes, I'm supposed to figure out who is going to play these roles. So the main thing about film is that, there is this person that's called a director, but it's the actual act of making a film takes a lot of people. And all of those people count, and they all are doing jobs that are very important, unless they're screwing up, which does happen. But it's I always tell people, that a director's job for the most part is done before you get on set. I didn't invent that. Of course, Hitchcock said that all the time. In fact, he said shooting was anticlimactic, as where I disagree with him. I think it's great fun to shoot, but you need to be prepared before you go onto the set, because different things can happen. And it's like somebody said to me one time, it's a great thing that we're not paid for the work we do, we're paid for the problems we can solve. And as the director, good Lord, everybody's going to ask you, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? How would you like this? How would you like that? And you're a lucky director if you're getting people that are giving you good options. But you got to do your homework. And 90% of your work on set as a director is people management. The creative is done before you get there. And you'll be creative while you're there, hopefully, but it's mostly people management. And, you get on the set, that's where all the money's being spent. You got to finish your day. You got to get through it. And if you don't finish your day, after that happens too many times, you just get fired.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so how do you personally develop a story?
Now that depends on the story. I mean, sometimes I write my own stories, and I don't do it that much because there's people that do it much better than I do. But again, it's about vision, and vision is the way that you see something. Okay. And you and I could be given the same piece of material and we both will see it differently. There may be lots of things that we see the same, but like, for instance, I have a really wonderful script right now that came from this writer from Paris. And she's given me 2 scripts, and one is a very big mob film, which I really look forward to doing. But the other one is a very small psychological thriller. And I'm dying to get that done, dying, because the story just lends itself to a very frightening, sexy sort of human, misrelationship. And in creating that sort of misrelationship, you have people that are suffering from, some sort of psychosis or another. And it's wonderful, like, because it takes on its own life, no matter how much, you have, in the script and in your planning, but it starts breathing. I got to tell you this. I mean, I did this movie one time called Angel Camouflage that I wrote it and I directed it. I was the DP. I made sausage rolls. I raised the money, and it was about $4 million. And it was written, I wrote it around the persona of a woman named Delana, who was a rock star from South Africa. And of course, she came with that South African accent. And there was a lot of people, there was some big names of people that wanted to play the supporting role, which was her brother slash manager. But none of them had the accent, and none of them wanted to do the accent. A South African accent is really hard to do unless you're born and raised with it. It becomes easy for those people. I don't know why. It must be what they eat, but they wouldn't do it. And there's no way that I was going to ask this woman that was a rock star, not an actor, to learn to act and learn an American accent. There's no way in the world. And so the point is that I then decided, okay, I've shot in South Africa about a dozen times. You know, they've got good actors. I just won't have a name, you know, for that role. Let me, you know, so I did a casting session there. I didn't go there. I had them do it, you know, and send me the tapes. And this guy did a scene that I had written, did the scene. And I looked at it and went, oh my God, did I write that? God, that's good.
Was it 3-minute casting?
You know what? It probably was, but I actually got to see him do the role and do it, you know, raw. And he was brilliant. I was a guy named Warwick Greer. What a guy. Love him. I'd never worked with him again, but I'd love to.
Okay. So what other kind of films have you directed?
Oh, you mean genre?
Yeah.
The first movie that I directed was a comedy. It was a kids' comedy named, it was called Opposite Day. And it was a funny movie. Pauly Shore was in that. He was a handful. Sorry,
I think
Pauly.
he's fun. He's funny.
Yeah.
He's definitely funny. I loved him actually in Encino Man.
Oh, Encino Man was great.
Yeah.
That was great. That was a really good movie. But also in that movie was Ariel Winter, who she's in Modern Family, and she's been in tons of things. She's so wonderful. But she was like 9 years old, sweetest thing. She was brilliant. We went to the table read, and she was completely off book, but not just for her role. She knew that whole script. Love her. She was amazing. Billy Unger was the other kid, and Dick Van Patten was in it. What's her name? Renee Taylor. A few of the people. It was really interesting. It was crazy little film. We shot it in LA, and that was good. But you know, comedies, you know, I don't mind doing comedy, and working with Dick Van Patten was a dream. He was a real sweetheart. But I've done some horror films. My favorite though really was Angel Camouflage, because it was a music driven rock thing. I also had Marshall Tucker Band and Curtis Blow. I originally had Joan Jett, and Joan had to cancel at the last minute because she was executive producer of a movie about her band called The Runaways. And there was something that was going on with that, and she had to leave to do that. And we were shooting that stuff toward the end, but we replaced her with Patty Smythe from Scandal. And I talked to somebody because I wanted it to be an 80s rock chick. And like we talked to Stevie Nicks and Deborah Harry and Pat Benatar. And Stevie was just getting off of a tour. She couldn't do it. Deborah really wanted to do it, but she wanted the lead role, but she couldn't. I mean, she wanted the top bill, and she couldn't have that. That was
all the rock and roll women greats back then, legends. I love.
They were amazing. I talked to Alana Miles, and I would have booked her, but she had just been in a car accident. And Alana, I was going to have her do Black Velvet in the film, and she's amazing. I've kept a friendship with her, but Patty was amazing. She was wonderful. It's funny because we called her, and her husband answered. Her husband is John McEnroe, and I'd shot John McEnroe in a Visa commercial. And the great thing about
what was that like?
Well, I'll tell you, the funny thing is, at one point, because part of it was shooting live at the U.S. Open, And it was like, don't bring your American Express card. They don't accept it. And so bring the Visa card. And um, at one point I was shooting John McEnroe, and I was shooting on 35, film, and the camera assistant closed something at one point, and John stopped in the middle of the game and pointed at me and yelled at me. And I just thought, yes, I've made it. I've been yelled at by John McEnroe.
Anger issues. Okay, so what kind of feedback do you receive from your actors?
Now that's a good question. Feedback from me. That's interesting, because you see,
No, from your actors.
Yeah, from the actors to me when I'm directing them.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, they just go, yes, sir, whatever you want. The funny thing is, though, is if the director is one of the jobs that we have to do, just a thing that you've always got to tell them something after a take. You can't just go, okay, we're going to do it. Hey, that was great. We're going to do it again. Because of course they're thinking, I just put everything I had in that. What do you mean it's great and we're going to do it again? It's like, so, it depends. Actors, I have an acting school. I teach acting, and I teach acting in a rather interesting way. Okay. When I first started studying acting in 1978, I first studied Lee Strasberg's method. And at first I thought, this is crazy. This is like a cult. And I went running into the street screaming. And then I tried a few other things. And then I realized, wow, that thing that made you scream was really the best. That was amazing. So I went back to it and really dedicated myself to it. And I had a mentor, which was Chuck Mara in New York, who had studied with Lee. And I get so much out of that. And so that's really the sort of way that I go toward it. But here's what's really interesting about the way that I do it, is that before I got into acting, I was always very curious about hypnosis. And so I'd studied hypnosis. And then when I studied Lee Strasberg's method and the relaxation techniques and the sense memory and all of that sort of stuff was just like an inch away from hypnosis, And so I thought for years, how do I wind this together? Well, it turns out that the Russians had done it for years. They do this thing called deep trance identification, where an actor, but not just an actor, anybody, a scientist, a chess player, well, all sorts of artists, writers, whatever, they'll do this, where they'll find someone who was a master at what they're doing, and then they will, through hypnosis, learn to identify with that person. And that identification helps bring them up. It doesn't make them that person, but it takes them on the same sort of trajectory. And it's brilliant. Well, I figured out how to do that with actors. Okay. And so I developed a thing, and I stole their name a little bit. I call it deep character identification, but it's really phenomenal. But I don't do it with people unless they want to do it. So I will present it to an actor if they're open to that. And if they are, then the world is your ice cube, because you can be and do just about anything when you understand how to do this. It's crazy. I love it. So wow. That's what I like.
I might have to think about that.
I'll be happy to show you how to do it.
Now I want it done to me.
No. What I do is I teach you how to do it. If I sit with an actor and they want to do something like that on the set, I will do that. I'll take them off. I won't take them through the whole thing of deep character identification, because that should take you a few weeks. That's things that you really ought to do before the movie starts. Yeah. But there's tweaks that you can do along the way. But I've had people come up to me on the set and say, even when I'm a cinematographer, like I was doing this one movie and this guy came up and said, I know what you do. I'm having trouble with this scene. Can you help me? And I, of course, then went to the director and said, I've been asked to do this. Do you mind if I do it? And oddly enough, on that particular instance, there was a character in the movie that was a hypnotist. And so that was actually, that theme was part of that movie. And so that was kind of fun. And the director was fascinated. But I never do it in front of people. I take somebody off to the side and, we have a little chat, and I take them to some place and they come back. It's good fun.
Okay, so tell us about your very first short film.
My first short film.
Yeah.
First let me say this. Okay, my first short film was a film that I made when I was in college in Tennessee at East Tennessee State. And I made a little horror film, and we shot it on black and white and 16 millimeter. It was a guy going crazy and taking some sort of stupid drugs, and he ends up under his house and he cuts his arm off. And I was in it. My roommate was in it. We both had really long hair, and it's hilarious. I'd love to find it. I've got one copy of it. That's all there is. I kept, over the years, I used to say, when I'd go to a telecine, to do color, correction on a project, I'd say, I'm going to bring that thing down there, and I'm going to transfer it, and just to have, because it's so goofy. But, a lot of people make shorts these days, and excuse me, there's some advantage to doing short films. One thing that I find that is a little bit of a detriment to people is the people that just do a lot of short films, hoping that those films are going to lead to a big film. It does happen. It does. But, so does, the winner of the lottery. And you really just ought to dive in and make a movie. And here's the thing about these shorts. It used to be on IMDb before they got bought up by Amazon or whoever it was. You couldn't put a credit on there for being an extra. I don't think there was a section or place. I don't think you could put a short film on there. And now you go and you find somebody and they've got like 50 shorts, and they just think that, well, look, I have all these things on IMDb. Yeah, but nobody's buying the shorts. Nobody's buying it. And I don't know if anybody's looking at them. And okay, it might be good for you to do it just to get some practice. But to put it out there and take it to festivals, and there's festivals that do nothing but shorts, and people might not like me saying this. I've done shorts like that. I've shot with students before to help them, like in class, if somebody does a particularly good job with their scene and they want to do that, I'll film it, but I'll film it in a way that makes it look like it's a scene from a movie, as opposed to somebody standing against a blue wall or, in their living room or something like that. It's not lit right or whatever. If I get somebody's reel, an actor's reel, and I see things that are obviously amateurish, I run. I don't want that. And I know maybe that's just all that you've had an opportunity, but it doesn't take $1 million to make something look professional. And if it's not done right, and see, like, if the great thing about doing it with somebody in class is we'll spend 6 weeks working on that one scene, and then we film that. And again, I'll only do it every now and then. I rarely ever do it, but when I do, it's a scene that's usually, they've really got it down. But people put these things together, and you got people like, James Cameron, who made some sort of quote that, like, you want to be a filmmaker, just take a camera, like take your iPhone and get your friends and your sister and her friends and get together and do a scene. And guess what? You're a filmmaker. I suppose in some definition, perhaps. Okay. But now let's get to the problems that come with that. We live in a digital age now, and I come from, when I got into business, we were using wooden legs and whorl heads, and it was all film. And I remember when HMIs came out, and they were taken over for, tungsten light, and it was still all very expensive. It's expensive to make film. Now I'm going to slip into sounding like an old guy, okay? Because I am an old guy, and I've seen a lot. I've been in the business for 44 years, and I've seen a lot of change. And back in the old days, that's a phrase that us old guys always say, and the old girls say it too, that when people got in the business, they got in at a particular level and they worked their way up. Now, I'm not saying that, if Leonardo da Vinci showed up or Rembrandt showed up and we would say, no, you got to be a PA for a couple of years. You need to drive a truck, maybe not. Maybe somebody that's really got some sort of amazing sort of talent. That's great. But here's the problem with most people today is that they go, gosh, I can buy a camera for $3,500. I'll just call myself a DP. I'll just start, making these films and I'll call myself a director. And that's great. Good for you. If you can do it, good for you. But here's the problem. If you don't come up through the ranks, you never have that opportunity to work with seasoned professionals, journeymen in your trade, and be mentored and learn things that you will not just be born with.
I agree. I tell everybody all the time the same thing. Like you have to work your way up. Everybody starts at the bottom normally.
And there's nothing wrong with it. We all do,
Yeah.
I mean, we all pick up cigarette butts and go get Coca-Colas for people. Don't smoke and don't drink Coca-Cola. It's all bad. but
Damn, I'm screwed.
but you know what? I came up working with people like, Alan Davio and Tony Forsberg from Sweden and Mac Ahlberg. And, I worked with some big DPs that as an assistant and learned things from them. Richard Bowen, who I did quite a few movies with, there's people today are not doing that. And, I always tell like my assistants always ask them, it's like, so you want to be, camera assistants, you want to be a DP? And they go, yeah. And a lot of times I'll say, well, what are you doing to make that happen? And they'll say, well, I'm not ready. It's like, listen, you'll never be ready. Never. You will never be ready. You just have to start doing it. And you'll make mistakes. So what? We all do. We continually make mistakes. If you ever look at the American Society of Cinematographers magazine in the back, when they have somebody new that's just gotten in, they'll do an interview with them, sort of like this one. And one of the questions they'll ask them is, what was your biggest or most important mistake? And most people will answer with, I don't talk about my mistakes. You should. This is what we as humans do wrong. We do something really great and we'll celebrate. We'll pat each other on the back and say, wow, what a wonderful thing. That's really wonderful. It's wonderful. If we do something wrong in our life, in our business, whatever, we'll hang our head or we'll try to forget it and we'll try to press on and do better next time. No, you need to examine that. You need to examine it. Once you examine it and embrace it, it's not going to be your friend. It won't come back.
I agree.
But we all make mistakes.
Agree. So, since we asked about your short film, now we're going to ask about your first feature film.
My first, well, I told you about that. That was, my first as a director was Opposite Day. My first feature film, gosh, because I did, I've done a lot as a DP as well. Like I did, gosh, what was the first? I don't even know what the first was. The first things that I did when I got out of college, I fell in with some people that were really cool. There was a guy named William Stromberg, who has since passed away. God rest his soul. But he had done a number of movies and he wanted to shoot some promos for movies. And I'd just gotten out of college and knew just enough to be dangerous. And there I was shooting these things, as DP, with, on 35 and, lights and crew and all this stuff. And I was smart enough, after I'd done about 4 or 5 of those things to say, I need to go, the normal way. to make sure that I do this right. But he actually has two sons. One is a very talented composer, also named William Stromberg, and the other one is Robert Stromberg, who designed and won the Academy Award for Avatar, and then the next year won the Academy Award for Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. And then Disney said, "Well, here's a guy who builds worlds," and they gave him Maleficent as his first movie to direct. That's who you ought to interview.
I love all of those. All of those movies. I liked Alice in Wonderland. I liked Avatar, and I love Melissa, or I can't say it.
Maleficent.
Maleficent.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. I think
yeah.
Angelina Jolie did a damn good job
She
in
was
that movie.
great. She was great. But Robert Stromberg that directed that. He did a brilliant job of it, and he was very humble about it. Though he called me up and said, "Hey man, I have to apologize. I can't bring you on this movie I'm doing." I said, "Hey, don't apologize, man. Keep yourself from getting fired. Get to the other end. You'll be a made man."
Right. Okay. So, out of all the different genres of movies, what's your favorite?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I mean, there's things that I don't like, I reckon, but I really don't. Because I like all sorts of things. I will confess something to you. I don't watch many movies. I don't really. I don't watch my own. It's funny. I don't have cable now. I have like Roku thing, so I can stream stuff, and I've done pretty good on catching up on my Sanford and Sons and um, Dog the Bounty Hunter, and now with this new baby I've got, I've pretty much caught up on Peppa the Pig. But it's funny. I had a director friend of mine asked me one time. He kept saying, "Did you see this movie? Did you see this one? Did you see this one? Did you see this one?" And I kept saying no. And he said, "Well, you have to see these movies." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you need to follow the trends." I said, "Okay, well, let's just take one of those movies, this one." And I said the name, and I said, "That movie's already come out," because this was during the Academy Awards season. And I said, "This one's already come out. So that means that it's already come out and it's been released. It was made at least a year and a half ago. It was made probably a year ago, but it started, being pre-prod, and don't know when the writing was, but it was at least a year and a half ago. So if I say, okay, I find some element in there that I really want to emulate and use in something, that's great. Well, then I start incorporating into a film of mine. And if it takes me a year and a half to get it out, it's 3 years old by the time it gets out. It's not a trend anymore. So, either there was a time when I was doing advertising that when people on Madison Avenue, then I would hear about it from other people, would refer to telling other people, "I want that Michael Givens look." For the life of me, I don't know what they meant. I don't know what the Michael Givens look was, but apparently there was one. And I think you have to stay true to your sort of creative soul. And if you have one, if you're not like going in all sorts of different directions, and you do have a creative soul, then that's what's going to color your palette, and that's your trend. And if somebody wants to try to follow that, good for them. But if not, I don't know. I mean, I've never thought about like trying to follow people. I mean, I certainly study people, like I still enjoy watching Alien, the first Alien, and just the look of it, and the way the story was told through, it was almost like looking at like these giant sort of paintings, and being able to walk into them. And that's really the way Ridley works. That it's a very lyrical way of telling a story. And so
Yeah.
And to be honest, I mean, that's when I prepare for something, I literally prepare for it by studying paintings and generally like Flemish paintings and, Baroque, and I go back there. I've been to Europe a few times specifically only to stare at paintings, and that I get much more out of that than watching somebody's film. And that's not to say anything against the people's film, but just by looking at a painting where somebody takes a paintbrush and they control every little element and everything is there for a purpose. And
Yeah.
that's just one frame. And
Mine's
it's awesome.
buildings. I have a thing about buildings, old buildings. When we did the shoot, it was the cemetery down here in the buildings. I don't know. Then when we filmed the music video, it was buildings. It's just
Mhm.
architecture. I don't know
Yeah,
why I'm obsessed with it.
that's cool.
I love it. I do.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so how did you come up with your very first idea for your film, your little film that you did?
Oh, that short film? Oh,
Mhm.
I have no idea. Lord, I was probably drunk. I don't know. I mean, that was in the mid '70s, and that was a fun time. But I have no idea,
So
really.
you and your little friends were sitting around drinking, saying, "Hey, I know what's a good idea for a movie. We're going to do a horror film where his arm falls off
He chopped it off.
or gets
Chopped it.
chopped."
He chopped it off with a machete.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
Okay.
That movie didn't make any sense. It was just, it was just
They never do when you're making your
no,
first movies anyway.
no. I
It's
was
fun to
18.
do.
I was 18 years old.
Okay, so next question. What do you think are the best elements of a film?
Lighting and music. And you can take music lots of places because lighting is like music, the acting is like music, editing is like music. It's these are the things that move people, and editing is, I do a tiny bit of that, and it's the most difficult, and it's only the most difficult because it's the thing that I'm not the most practiced at, but it's so important. It can, it's like I'm doing a documentary right now, and a fellow that hired me to do it, was wanting me to have somebody else edit it, and I think he was just trying to be nice to me, and I said, well, here's the problem. I mean, I've now interviewed 20 people. I've got just like the transcripts are like that thick,
Yeah.
of all of this stuff. And I said, nobody knows it better than me. And I know the elements that tell the story. And if you get somebody else in that doesn't really know it, they'll tell the story through their eyes and with their own interpretation. And, a documentary is different because it's got, if it may have a specific, and this one's about first two waves of Jewish immigration to America, and how they contrast to the third wave, which the third wave was this giant wave of like 2.5 to 3 million Jews that came from Eastern Europe and Russia. And the first two were, the first was Sephardic, that were the people that had spent all of their time during Golden Age in Hispania, which was Spain and Portugal. And then they ended up getting kicked out of there in 1492. At the same time, Columbus, was coming over to get a patty in Jamaica, and so then they went to Brazil and then came to America, and they had just been through a lot different human experience than the people that came from war-torn revolution countries. They had actually lived like an amazing life. And then the Germans, the Ashkenazis, came, and they also had had a really great time before they came to America. And it was a completely different thing. The story is like unknown. I mean, a lot of Jewish people don't know these stories, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's real eye opener for me. I'm not Jewish, and so that's the the third question that I get when I interview people, because I interviewed all Jewish people, most of them were, professors. And the third question was always, why are you doing this? Because I was hired, but I love it.
It happens. It does happen. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me see. Do you think there are enough opportunities for people with limited experience in this industry?
That's a good question too. The thing is about that is there's opportunity for anybody, because really with limited experience, you should do like the rest of us, and you should start at the bottom and work your way up. So there's always going to be. I'll tell you my perspective on film as a whole. That I don't know if you can see it this way, but when we, okay, I'm older than you, but when we were youngsters, say in the early 60s, let's say, I come from the 50s, but let's just say in the 60s, film was only about 40 something years old at that point. I mean, it started in the teens really, but it didn't really start going until the 20s, and didn't have sound until 29. And if you could say that, okay, kind of modern film would start with at least the voice. So say by the time it got to the normal stage, at least 1932-ish, where pretty much most films had sound attached to them. And so you get to 1962, it's only 30 years. It's 30 years. It's 30 years old. And so you've got 30 years of movies, and very few of them in the beginning. And of course, during almost all of that time, a movie would come out, it would go to the theater. If it was lucky, it would be there for a week. If it was really lucky, it would be there for 2 weeks. And that was its life. It would disappear. Now, of course, TV got popular in the 50s, and movies started being able to be shown again on that. But remember, if you're talking about the 60s, the 40s were only 20 years before that, where people didn't have TVs. And so what I'm getting at is that there weren't many movies. There weren't many movie stars. There weren't many auteurs. There weren't many artists making these things. Cut to the world, not just Hollywood, not just America, but the world in 2022. It's now over 100 years.
Yeah, so they didn't have DVDs and
No, they didn't have
VHS
they didn't
or
have streaming.
anything.
They didn't have streaming.
I know.
You can go on YouTube and look up almost any movie, and if not see the whole movie, at least see part of it. But you can look up any movie. And when in the old days, its life was maybe 2 years. I'm sorry, 2 weeks. And that was it. It was gone. And there were only so many actors that we had been exposed to on the silver screen. And obviously, we don't all get to go to the theater. So once movies came along, much more people got an opportunity to see a movie star doing something. And they created movie stars. Movie stars didn't exist. And now, because there's so many outlets, there's so many films, and you have to start from when it started. There's so many of them. It starts becoming less and less important as a thing. It's just like, when they first figured out how to print a book, or rather when the government stopped oppressing printers and allowed them to print books. Yes, governments have oppressed people from day one. I don't know why we elect people to oppress us, but that's what we do. But a lot of places it's kings and queens and emperors and dictators and this sort of thing. But let's not get too terribly political. But when they first published books, one of the things that they did that some governments didn't want is they didn't want the Bible to be printed. They didn't want people to actually read the Bible. They wanted a preacher who may be controlled by a government to explain to them what was in their Bible. Okay. Well, then suddenly the printing press comes out and people could read, and they got to get books, and they got to get the Bible, and they got to see what was really happening. Okay. And now anybody can make a movie. Will it be any good? Will it be great? Not necessarily. But now there's so much stuff, so much. I mean, go look at your streaming channels. They have movie after movie after movie. Have you ever been to the American film market or any film market where they're selling movies? American film market is in November, and it's in Santa Monica, California. And they put it in this one hotel. Forgot the name of it, but I've been to it. And it's a very sobering experience to walk the halls, because what they do is a different distribution company, sometimes a different production company, takes takes a room. So all the rooms in this hotel are, each one is a different production company or distribution company, mostly distribution companies. You walk down the halls, there's all these big posters for films. And you walk in, you talk to them, and they try to tell you something. I mean, once they figure out that you're not a buyer of films, then they don't really want to talk to you. But
That's anywhere.
yeah, but you chat with people and find out what's out there. And what's really sobering is that when you walk those halls, many floors of this building, every one of them different, and with all these different movies, and then you go like, gosh. Later on, you think, what happened to this movie? What happened to this one? You never hear of them. You never hear, because there's so many.
Yeah.
And now, since COVID came along, and our fanciful little government said, hey, stay home. Don't go to the movie theater. Don't go to church. Don't go see your grandma. Don't do this. Don't do. And people stayed home. And people are made out of habit. That's what they're made. We're not made of flesh and bone. We're made of habit. And when people got out of the habit of going to church, they stopped going to church. I think they went to see grandma if she was still alive, but they stopped going to the movie theater. And plus, you can watch it on your device. You can watch it on your wristwatch.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the cinema has been fighting television since the 1950s. That's why we have widescreen. They would try other things like 3D and smell-o-vision and then they tried turning cinemas into bars and restaurants to get people out of their butts. And I think probably the biggest thing that sold during COVID was 85-inch TV screens down at Costco. And now people, they're just like, wow, this is really great. I can turn it off. I can look at it again tomorrow. I can go have a piss. I can go, whatever, and have my friends over. And, we'll just get drunk here. Yeah. I don't know where it's headed. You weren't asking me that question. And
I know.
But whatever you talk about and think about and is important to you, if you can ever just take a step back and look at the big picture and say, well, what's really going on here? Because who would have thought 10 years ago that, like Amazon would take over IMDb? I'm not against it. I think they've done a good job. For the most part, like their search engine now is brilliant. It really helps you to get more work if you know how to work that machine. But the world is so different. And you got it when you understand this whole the history of it. We're just a little over 100 years now. How much more content is going to be out there to water down all the other content, because that's what it does.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no such thing as a Humphrey Bogart. There's no such thing as a Julie Newmar, for that matter. I mean, she's still around, thank God. But what I mean by that is, like, Hedy Lamarr. Where's today's Hedy Lamarr? And she was brilliant. I'll tell you what, we wouldn't have these today if it wasn't for Hedy Lamarr. Her idea was she came up with the idea of Bluetooth. Okay.
That's a good idea.
I'm not kidding. She was way, way before her time. But the point is that back then you only had a handful of them. And now, there's influencers, it's strange. Strange.
Do you have any advice for aspiring filmmakers?
Oh gosh. Stay true to your vision, but mentor. Get with people that will teach you how to do these things correctly. And it's not just the technique of making the film. It's also just how to deal with the business and the process. Because a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people get in it and they go, it's like, oh my God, we're working 12 hours a day. You're lucky you're only working 12 hours a day. And, the people that complain, I mean, we recently almost had a strike recently. And I saw people online that were saying that they wanted movies to be made with 8 hours a day. And it's like, where do you think that money comes from? It is so difficult to
Mhm.
raise money to make a movie, on a 4, 6, 7, week, schedule that, how long do you think it would take to make that movie if you were shooting 8 hours a day? And I got to tell you, the first time that I was told we're only shooting 10 hours, I said, oh my God, okay, that means I've only got either, the sunrise or the sunset. Or if you schedule it properly, I'll get neither. And, I think it's very important that we make our films look good. And so, it does take time. I think 12 hours should be the limit. We shouldn't really go much further than that. I used to traditionally shoot, you know, 14 to 16 hours a day. And I used to, when I was working with Peter Smiley, we used to work very long hours, but we would take a 4-hour lunch.
There you go. That's my kind of lunch right there.
Well, the reason for that is because usually, like if we were shooting exteriors, the light was not good during the middle of the day anyway. And so we would have lunch, we'd go back to the hotel, take a nap, you know, like, Europeans, a siesta, and then go back and we'd work until after sunset. But we got, we would shoot the most beautiful stuff you can imagine.
A lot of people don't understand. I mean, they think, oh, well, we're going to go work 10, 12 hours and then it's over. But the creators
Yeah.
involved are working 23 hours a day for years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing, actually, you bring up that point, and that's sort of like, producers that, like, people get on the job and they're complaining and they're mad. It's like, these producers, they don't do anything. They just lay around, sit in those chairs and bark orders and this stuff, and they get all the money. It's like, well, they were actually working on getting this thing together for years before you ever got the call to come work on it. So, you got to have perspective on all of this stuff. It's a tough business too. If you don't get in the business if you're not prepared to work really hard, go get a regular job. It's much easier. And also, if you think you're going to get in this business just to get rich, okay, you can do it. You can. There are certain things that you should do, but if you're wanting to do something sort of cutting edge, whatever that means, I have no idea what that means, but I've heard the expression. If you're going to do something that's a bit avant-garde, which I think is French for cutting edge, you have to be prepared for people not being ready to accept it. And, you might go hungry, and that's okay.
Yeah. A couple of things off topic I want to get your opinion about. Okay, this is some things I won't tell you what I tell people, but I just want your personal opinion. Okay, so there's a controversy out there. I don't know if you've heard anything about it. Where there are certain people out there teaching and saying, don't put extra work down on your resume, which I understand not putting extra work on a resume. But would you honestly, in your opinion, want to see that that person actually had some kind of experience versus them giving you a resume with nothing on it?
That's assuming that there's some sort of experience that I would be looking for from an extra.
Well, I mean, say they started as an extra, they have extra experience, they have it on they're putting it on their resumes because this is a controversy. I'm seeing it in numerous groups about, putting extra work down on their resumes. And
Yeah.
some people are saying do it, some people are saying don't do it. But in my opinion, honestly, this is the way I feel. I would rather see that that person has done some kind of work on a film set whether it's 3 or 4 extra roles versus somebody coming to me with nothing on a resume, knowing that we could potentially have issues with that person.
Okay.
But I mean, what would you rather see? That's just
I don't
my
ever, I don't
opinion.
ever, unless I'm casting for extras, which is never my business. Somebody else does that. And, the DGA doesn't even allow the directors to talk to the extras. I always do anyway. And I go to the room where they corral extras and I talk to them because I think they should be treated like human beings. But as far as putting it on your resume, I think if you want to be a professional extra, then put it on your resume.
No, I mean actor. Say they're coming to
I know
audition
what
for
you're
you.
talking about, and
Yeah.
I would highly recommend not doing it. And if I see an actor's resume that's got extra work on it, I will just assume that they're not ready for prime time. Now, let me just
Yeah.
tell you what I tell my students about this very thing, because I get students that'll tell me all the time. It's like, hey, I'm going to go be an extra in this sort of show. And I always ask them why. Why are you going to be an extra? And they say, well, I just want to be on the set and see, what happens and what goes on. I said, okay, all right. Come to me when you've done it. I got a few questions for you, because it's not like extras are like walking around the set, like, chickens at large, in a barnyard. No, extras get put in a corral. They get put in a room, extras holding area. They're not there milling about seeing how things are done. Okay. They generally don't pay them very well. They often don't feed them the same thing they feed the rest of the cast and crew. So after they come back and I ask them these questions and find out that that's exactly the way that they've been treated, I say, so your point was to learn how things go on the set. Yes. Okay. If you want to learn and you don't have any other experience and you want to learn how things are on the set, go to the production manager and try to get yourself a job as a PA. A production assistant will be on the set all the time, except when they've been sent on a run, but they will see what everybody does. They'll be able to figure out if there's something in there that they would like to do. And they won't be corralled into a dark room. They won't be fed anything different, and they'll probably be paid more than you just got paid. And should the PA work go on your resume? No. Your acting resume should only have your acting on it. And I don't mean this as an insult, but oftentimes extra work is referred to as breathing furniture. And the reason for that is it's not acting. You can be back there pantomiming and that sort of thing, and you might get excited because you're a featured extra. And I'm not making fun of it. We have to have them, but that's different than carrying a movie with a role. And don't confuse the two. And the reason that people say that they do it are those reasons, is that I want to see, what goes on set. Go be a PA. And if you're an actor, heck, go work on the crew side. If you're not working, if you're not shooting something, go work on the crew side. You'll meet people, you'll start understanding what it takes to make a movie. If you as an actor can think like a producer, you are worth a lot. And if you understand what goes into making a movie, and you understand, particularly, it's like a lot of movies these days are shot with multiple cameras, and that's really to the actor's advantage because it becomes more like a stage play. But the beauty of film compared to stage is take two. Okay, we don't have take two on the stage, but we do have it in film. But what you as an actor have to do on the set is that when you have take two up to take 50 or up to take whatever, you need to be consistent, and to have that skill of being able to create a believable emotional experience multiple times. Now you're so valuable that people will fight to get you on the next movie.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. I mean, I started, well, actually, no, I did a short film and then was an extra, or it might have been the other way around. But from running my own business, I learned more, as far as paperwork and everything involved.
Mhm.
And then training, years of training with people that are awesome to train with. And you have to learn. And I believe that working on both sides is
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
an advantage.
It also
Definitely an
gets you paid
advantage.
when you're not being paid,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also you meet people and, there's a lot of that, cast and crew. We really, you go to shoot a movie, you build like a little town, and you really want to fill your little town up with people that you actually like spending time with,
Yeah.
because you end up spending time with them. Sometimes, time you shouldn't spend with them. But yeah,
Okay, so
should have been there in the 80s.
I was, gosh,
I'm speaking to
10.
the audience about.
I was 10, I think, before 1990. So what are some of your other hobbies outside of film?
Uh, well, most everything I do has something to do with film, like hypnosis. I use that, for actors. I use it for myself, and um, I do that. Gosh, I don't know that I really do anything outside of it. It's child rearing. Uh, gosh, I read a lot. This is my library here. That's me sitting there. So it's a still photo of my
I
library.
like that.
But gosh, what do I do? I
No hiking, swimming,
No, I mean,
painting.
I go for I go for, a walk every day, but no, I don't. It's all work, but it's work that I love.
Yeah.
So it's funny. My first family, my wife tried to get me out of the business. It's what you married.
You can't get somebody out of a business if they're content with doing what they want to do,
And I
if
was
that's what makes them
successful.
happy.
I was
Yeah.
successful. I mean, that was God, anyway, I can't talk about her.
I could probably tell you what one of your future hobbies might be.
Well, tell me. I want
Playing
to.
Barbies.
Well, I've already raised one daughter. Um, eh, it was funny. I actually made some commercials for Mattel for Barbie. That was hilarious. It was the closest I ever came to working for, like, in a corporate world, because they had their office in the Mattel Tower, as they called it, in El Segundo or something like that in LA. And that's where you'd go to, to have the PPM for a commercial, and then we would shoot at a stage close by, and it was weird. I
I
mean,
didn't collect Barbies. I know a lot of people who collect those Barbies, and some of them, if you keep them in the box and don't touch them, which that kind of defeats the point, they become worth money. But my thing when I was little was collecting Cabbage Patch dolls. I loved Cabbage Patch dolls. They're so cute, but you don't see them anymore, very seldom.
I don't know anything about that.
Well, I mean, other girls out there in the audience, I'm sure you're gonna know about Cabbage Patch Kids. Yeah,
I know about them. I mean, I've heard of them,
I love them. Okay, so do you have a personal quote or motto that you live your life by?
but it's funny because I came up with something like that that's on my website, but basically, um, the things that we film actually become life. And that's not to say that, like, if we shoot nothing but, shoot 'em up films, mobster films and stuff like that, that we're just training people to be gangsters. But obviously film is one of the biggest in modern day, because didn't exist in ancient days, but is the way that popular culture is fed is truly out of film, and film is the most powerful form of propaganda that's ever been made. I think we have a responsibility as filmmakers to take care of that instead of taking advantage of that. But I find that most, or not most, but a lot of people take advantage of it. And so I think you just have to be cognizant that what you're doing in this world of film affects people. And you just have to be careful with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I mean, even as far as I'm big on music. I love film. I love shooting film. I love that industry. But my favorite thing to do, really, like a hobby of mine, is music and painting.
Mm.
I love to paint, and I will just paint and paint and paint, and it relaxes me. I think, you're shooting these films, you got to have some way to unwind, or working every day, you still got to have a way to unwind. And I think it's good to have a hobby that takes your mind off stuff like that. And music
Yeah,
does,
but
definitely.
it's like asking that question. Like I like to read,
Yeah,
and I read every day, and I can read quite quickly when I have to. And uh, oddly enough, I read a lot of scripts, and I don't like almost all of them. And I'm not saying that because I'm so good and I would do much better, but I'm surprised at just how sloppy people can be. Even typos bother me, unless it's typos because they're a foreigner writing it. I give them a break just because if English isn't their first language, I give them a break. Uh, but uh, but I just people have just I don't know. Everybody like wants to try to do something, but they're just not learning how to do it. And storytelling is a very intricate thing, and there's no one set way to do it anymore. I mean, like what? How many notes in the scale are there? Seven. And how many different types of symphonies and rock songs and ballads can you write with just these seven notes? Of course, there's minors and there's flats and sharps and all this other stuff, but it's the same with film. And there's methods, to writing. Like there's this book by Robert McKee called Story, which I love this book. I think it's very, very good about helping people understand how to grasp story. But it's a set of rules that are easily broken. You know, any of those books, like Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey, Blake, what's his name? He passed away. That wrote Save the Cat. Save the Cat is very formulaic and tells you, how to write a script, but it's not rules that are set in stone, but there are things like that are pointed out in Robert McKee's book about the inciting incident, that the inciting incident should happen fairly early within like 10% of your film. The first 10%, you need to understand the reason of what the protagonist is doing or sacrificing to do. And if you don't, people just get bored. It's just the way the brain works.
yeah,
Look at Joseph Campbell's stuff. He explains it better than anybody. In fact, that's where Christopher Vogler got his stuff for the writer's journey. I mean, the writer's journey. That if there's certain things that you need to follow for the human brain to understand in a story, but it's just like those seven notes. It's endless of what you can do within these parameters. I mean, I remember when I was in film school, I used to look at everything that they would teach as just a tool just to hang on to. And I'll use that the way that I want to use it. But if I don't really understand it, and the great thing about, like, I went to Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara, which was like a scientific photography film school. And they made us do really horrible things, like take a particular film. It was called Plus X, and made us use a particular paper to make prints that were completely incompatible. And they made us do that to force us to be able to make it work. and we would have to break down and understand the different layers of film and different layers of the paper and the how the chemicals worked with it. And once you understood that, that wasn't a thing. Like, they weren't trying to create chemist for Kodak. What they were trying to do is just to get you to understand the basics of it so you can throw that away and then concentrate on what sort of emotion you're trying to get out of it. Because if you don't understand the technique and you're screwing up with the technique, then that's what people notice. You know, if you have bad sound in your movie, no matter how good your story is, people just remember that movie sucked. I don't know what it was about it, but it sucked. Well, it sucked because the sound was bad. If the lighting's really bad, after a while, people can't stand it. People don't really notice great lighting if it's done right. And people have told me before, it's like, you shouldn't make your movie like you're walking through, a museum of nothing but Rembrandts and Vermeers, because, people get bored with it. And it's like, no, 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 no. They just get into this world of beauty, and it just doesn't affect them as beauty, and we don't want it to. We want it to help tell the story, but beauty is a great way to tell a story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
You ought to start.
We
You
don't
ought
want to lose anybody out there.
you ought to start doing more interviews like this.
That is actually my intention. I mean, with Laura, I decided, I was going to do articles for actors, up and coming actors, and then I got the idea, well, I need to add more to it. Let's do health and fitness. Let's do a director's corner and then a writer's block. And that's my intention. And I
A
have
writer's block.
yep. I want to do a writer's block where you actually can, either they can send me, the article to the questions, or we can do a video just like this and put it up just like that in a different section of it. Because
But I love how you call it a writer's block.
yeah,
Because of course, writer's block means that you don't know what to write and you're staring at a blank page. I know the cure for writer. I know the cure for writer's block. You know what the cure for writer's block is, and this works in anything. Just start writing.
mm-hmm.
Now that may sound too simple and like, oh, sure, but I just can't figure out what to write. Then don't worry about it. Just start writing. That photo of me sitting in the office right there.
Mm-hmm.
The books that are directly behind me, like from neck down, are all Victorian novels. Okay. And I like 19th century books because the writers, and one row of those is the 19th century version, actually 1911 version of the Encyclopedia Britannica, because it's written by the best scholars of the 19th century. But the 19th century writers had a way with words that was absolutely brilliant. And when I would sit at that computer right there and write, and if I got the block, which usually would happen at the beginning of what I was writing, I would just reach down at random and just pick a novel and just open it up and start reading it anywhere. Because just hearing words put together, making sense, making me feel a particular way. And I'm kind of weird about that. It's like I like first edition books that have been through a lot of people, because then I know that lots of people have held that same book and had either the same thought or thoughts in the same vein as what the writer was hoping that we would have. And it's like it tells you. And then that will feed your brain to just start writing. And then you just start writing. It doesn't matter if you write about what you're supposed to be writing about, just start writing. And then, it's a computer. You can just erase it, just get rid of it. And then just start writing or don't get rid of it. Get rid of it later, then start writing your regular stuff. But that will get you writing. Actually, I learned that from an editor, not a film editor, but a writing editor who told me that. And it works.
I'm old school. I love to write by hand first and then go from there, because once from criminal justice and all that in school, writing was easy, and I was doing 20-25 page papers every other day. And now when I'm writing all of this, my mind just goes. And normally I have these on and I'm listening to music and I'm just in the zone.
I
you
like
know?
that.
Yeah.
For me, I used to do that when I wrote Angel Camouflaged. And that's an interesting story, actually, if you want to hear it. But I originally wrote it on a legal pad with a pencil, and then I went back and put it in final draft. But um, I can't do that now because my penmanship is so bad that I can't read it. I would have to go back and be proficient in ancient cuneiform to read my own writing. And seriously, I'll take notes. Like I've got the stack of notes right here from this documentary. And sometimes I'll look at the notes like, what does that say? I don't even know. I don't recognize it. And I don't know. I think faster than I can write. So I don't do so. I type now, but it's funny.
I've done that, looked at stuff that I've written down and be like, what the hell did that just, I don't know what it was. I can't figure it out. So I just throw it away because I get stuck. That's awesome. So what's going on for you next, Mr. Gibbons?
After I'm finished with you, I'm going for a walk.
You're going to go for a walk.
Yes, but what I know that you didn't mean that. What you mean is, what am I filming next? I'm leaving
Yes.
on Saturday to go to Kentucky to shoot a movie, and it's a romantic comedy. And then that particular production company is threatened to hire me for 3 movies in a row. We'll see what happens.
You'll be down this way.
Yes, I sure will. And then I'm working very hard to get some big names attached to this psychological thriller. I want to do that right away. And at the first of the year, there's somebody else that just offered me another movie, which is really cool, which is what is that? It's a horror film, which also looks like it'd be the first of the year. And we'll see. I remember one year I went home to South Carolina from LA for Christmas. This is when I was doing commercials. And I went home, I felt, oh, great, I get to relax, see the family and this sort of stuff. And I had 11 commercials lined up afterwards. And they were big. They were big things, big jobs. And I came back, and like dominoes, for one reason or another, they all went away.
Wow.
So, I never believe anything until I arrive on the set. And the other thing that I want to point out, it was a little story that keeps me in check about things. It's like people have this idea about movies and about how we make them, and the people that aren't in this business, they say, okay, and a movie is like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. Why does it take you 6 weeks or more or even less to make a movie? And that just doesn't even make sense, and they don't understand all the stuff. But it's not even that. It's not the making the movie. It is always about raising the money. And raising the money is the hardest thing. And the story that gets me, and I could have these numbers slightly wrong, but you've heard of Martin Scorsese before.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with him once on a little movie called Raging Bull. A lovely man, but he had a friend, a young fella named Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, and he and Leonardo DiCaprio were going to make a movie, and they'd already made some movies together, such as The Aviator. Well, they wanted to make this movie called The Wolf of Wall Street. Well, it took them from the time that they started talking about it until the time that they did the first slate was like 9 years. Now, there's few people more connected in the film industry than those two fellas. If it took them 9 years to get their thing together, it can be disheartening, but it takes a while. It takes a while to get the money and to get people. And, people think, it's like, well, I have this wonderful project and I'll find people that will have the same passion and they'll want to get involved with it. No, they don't necessarily share your passion. What their passion could be is, a mortgage. And taking care of their family and, keeping their business from going under. And they need your movie to make a lot of money. And so they look at all the different elements that will or will not make that money. And nobody really knows until it comes out, but you have to hedge all of your bets, and it's all about raising the money.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there are so many people out there, and we've talked about this, how they just get mad because their projects aren't being made overnight when nothing happens overnight. People are not
Yeah.
going to give you millions and millions of dollars, you know,
I know.
especially.
I know, and I've known this forever. I mean, I made a movie back in. I mean, I didn't make it. I worked on it in the early to mid '80s. I did this movie with Robert Duvall, and again, few people in the '80s were more connected than Bobby Duvall. And he and I were laying by the pool one day, and he started telling me this story about this movie that he was going to do, where he was going to play this preacher. And actually, he was a preacher in the movie we were doing. It was called Belisaire Occasion. It was originally had a much better name, which was called the Acadian Waltz, but it was Armand Assante and Robert and Will Patton was in that one too. But
I like him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's from South Carolina. That's why he's a good guy. But anyway, he told me about that movie. And from the day that he told me about that until the day they released The Apostle was 11 years. And that was a little movie. It was like $1 million. And it took 11 years to get that thing made. I mean, that was
Avatar took, that took what, 10 or 11 years, 10 years?
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't be surprised. But
yeah,
the bigger it is, sometimes the harder it is, because there's so much at stake. When you make a 50 to 60 or 70, $100 million movie, there's a lot at stake, a lot. And so you really got to get the right pieces together and make sure that the story is something that people are going to want to dive into. But, you make a nice indie film, for $1 million or $2 million, and you will then be dealing with people that $1 million or $2 million is equally as important as the investors for the $100 million film. So it's all the same.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I guess we're gonna wrap this up, and I'll let you go for your walk, and we'll see who we can get to come on next.
Excellent.
We're gonna call out some directors and. Hey, Michael Gibbons said that people should be doing these interviews. That's what I'm going to tell him.
I'll give you a few people if you want them.
Hey, I'll take them.
All right.
Definitely.
You may be making money off of YouTube soon.
Now I want to keep this on the sites.
Yeah, you should put it in both places actually, because you'll monetize it on YouTube if you get the right people.
Yeah, I'll do it on my site first and then probably go ahead and link it to YouTube.
Right.
But right now I'm going to be greedy with your guys' time.
All right, my darling. It's been great talking to you.
You also. And if you're in Kentucky, hit me up.
I'm gonna. You'll be here
that far.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
I adore. On that night when I first gave my heart to yours, I was scared and feeling insecure. You told me, my darling, even on your darkest days, you'd always reassure